We'll go ahead and begin. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We're so glad to see you back here for the virtual Mind Walks program again. My name is Mallory. I'm thrilled to be here with you today and with our presenter. Real quick, I'd like to just say a little bit about the program. The Mind Walks program is underwritten by the Thomas E. and Mary Kathryn Eltzroth Fund and supported by the Central Coast State Parks Association. We now offer both in-person and virtual Mind Walk opportunities, alternating between the two each month. And you can view that upcoming schedule at the link seen here on the screen. If you would like to help support the Mind Walk program or another state parks educational program, please check out the link on the screen, centralcoastparks.org/friend, where you can make a donation to the Central Coast State Parks Association. Donate $35 or more to become a friend of CCSPA and receive perks such as store discounts and newsletter subscriptions. There are several different programs you can choose to support and make an impact in. Thank you so much for your consideration, and thank you to those who are already friends of CCSPA. All right, I'm thrilled to be able to introduce Stephanie Ambrosia. Her presentation is titled Welcome to Nimbus Fish Hatchery, a Northern California Legacy. So Stephanie is an educator of 13 years, 6 of which she has worked as a natural resource interpreter. She is currently the manager of staff, volunteers, and visitor services at the Nimbus Fish Hatchery Visitor Center, which hosts 75,000 guests annually, including 10,000 school children. Her major role is to help communities connect with nature in a meaningful way while encouraging actions that positively affect the environment. So we'll go ahead, as usual, be answering questions at the end of the program, but feel free to enter your questions into the chat box or utilize the Q&A feature if you have that, and that way you won't forget your question and we'll get to it later. And I'll stop sharing my screen, and Stephanie, you go for it.
Thanks, Mallory. I really appreciate that introduction. And I apologize, like the first mosquito I've seen all winter just decided to come in and start harassing me. So I'll try to ignore that. I want to make sure sound is good. Can everyone hear me okay? Just let me know in the chat. Oh, chat is disabled. Okay. Mallory, are we able to fix that? Because I'm definitely going to ask our audience to participate.
I will work on that.
Well, oh, that's in the Q&A. Okay, they've entered into the Q&A.
Okay, chat is disabled. That is so interesting. Well, I'm going to be working on that in the background and trying to sort it out. But your sound is great.
Okay, great. No worries. And I'll get started. That's great. Okay, I appreciate you letting me know that the sound is good, Linda. And let's do a quick PowerPoint check. Are we good, Mallory, on the PowerPoint? We just see the one slide.
Yep, looking great.
Okay. Great. Well, hello, everybody. Again, my name is Stephanie Ambrosia, and I work for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'll tell you a little bit more about my region, and specifically at Nimbus Fish Hatchery. Although I did work for California State Parks in the past, and I grew up going to California State beaches, so they hold a very, very special place in my heart, and I'm sure they hold a special place in your heart too. I imagine this audience really cares about our state's beautiful places. So speaking of Nimbus Fish Hatchery, has anybody in our audience ever visited Nimbus Fish Hatchery? I'd like to know. You can say either yes or no. And that also reminds me just to mention once again that during the program today, I will openly invite you to participate by sending some answers my way. Maybe in the chat if we open it. If not, the Q&A will work just fine. But I'll probably speak about 30 or 35 minutes. And then, as Mallory said, I'll open it up to questions. Okay, we have a yes and a no. Yeah, if anybody can add in some more answers, that'd be great. I'm just curious if you've ever been before. All right. So again, oh, we have more yes and more no. Not been, but I know the area. Great. Okay. Oh dear. Sorry, everyone. We're getting the kinks worked out. Now I can't see this is what I want. A breakdown once more, summary of what we're going to do today. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about California Department of Fish and Wildlife, as well as the hatchery. Ooh, some of the controversy, and then the natural history of the area around the hatchery. Then we'll take some time for questions. And here's a lovely picture of our American River overlook that we make a lot of use of for our school programs, as you can imagine. And first, we will do a land acknowledgement. And you may have heard a land acknowledgement before. You may never have heard a land acknowledgement before. But it's a way for us to recognize the indigenous people native to an area, the original stewards of our lands. And so the California Department of Fish and Wildlife acknowledges the indigenous peoples who traditionally made their living along the shores of the American River, where our facility now sits, as well as the diverse and vibrant native communities who make their home here today. And the major tribes of our area include the Nishanan, the Maidu, and the Miwok people. And for those who appreciate resources to help you learn more about indigenous communities, I highly recommend this website, native-land.ca. And it's a very, very innovative geo-sourced resource where you can basically plug in your zip code anywhere in the world and then find indigenous people associated with that place. And it's created by a Canadian indigenous firm, and they're constantly developing it and adding more. And in the meantime, I see that others have added to the chat. So we have a pretty equal mix of yes, I've been there or I know of it, and no, I've never been to Nimbus Fish Hatchery. The main idea today is that, though not without controversy, the Nimbus Hatchery plays a key role in the American River system and the natural history of native salmon and trout who call our waterways home. So really it play a key role in this environment, and we're going to find out exactly how. And I lost my train of thought for a moment. Before I dive more into our hatchery, I would love to get to know you a little bit, because as I said, I'm sure most of you appreciate our special places, our natural spaces here in California. What are the special places or species that you are passionate about? What are you passionate about protecting? Can you let me know in the Q&A? Oh, the chat's working now. In the chat. That's great. Let me know in the chat. What are some special places or species you are passionate about protecting? I know that many of you are along the Central Coast, and we have so many special places there. Maybe we have some added to the Q&A. Okay, salmon, Montaña de Oro. Salmon is in North America. Okay, we have people who are salmon fans already. Shoreline axis and the dunes, monarch butterflies, rainbow trout in the Sierra Nevada. We already have some fish fans amongst us. That's great. Raptors, wonderful. Beaches. That's great. I can see that we have a passionate crowd here today. And of course, this is our mission at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, similar to State Parks' mission. We manage California's diverse fish, wildlife, and plant resources and habitats upon which they depend for their ecological values and for their use and enjoyment by the public. So you might be wondering, what does use and enjoyment by the public mean as far as our natural resources are concerned? So our agency is a scientific agency as well as a regulatory agency. So if you like to hunt or fish, then you will know CDFW very well, because CDFW sets and enforces regulations for fishing and hunting and sustainable harvest of our wildlife, as well as scientific research and conservation. So it's a little different than the California State Park side, which is focused on recreational opportunities, safe recreational opportunities. But we do have recreational spaces managed by our agency. It's just not our bread and butter. And the North Central region is where I am located, but it is a big region. It's that blue part on the map that you see, and specifically includes these counties, many counties. As you can see, we've got Sacramento, Yolo, Yuba, Sutter, El Dorado, Amador, lots of counties there. Some of you might be from one of these counties. All right, so you might be wondering, why did they invite Stephanie all the way from Sacramento to give us a mind walk here for the Central Coast State Parks audience? Well, we are connected. We are connected. Maybe you already know. And I have a pop quiz question for you. Which species of salmon is a linking factor between our regions, my region and your region, Central Coast? Which species of salmon? Let me know in the chat. I'll give you a hint. We have an MBA team here in Sacramento that pays homage to this salmon. Oh, Tyler wins. Okay, Tyler, king salmon. That's right, king salmon, also known as Chinook salmon. And they are one of the 5 species of Pacific salmon. And here in our region, we are the lowest latitude that Pacific salmon will spawn, which is quite interesting. However, the salmon are linked to the Central Coast, which we will find out in just a bit. My dog insists on playing with the tennis ball right now. Okay, so here's a nice video we have of some king salmon. Let's see if it's gonna play. We're gonna dive underwater, because if we don't go underwater, we have a difficult time actually seeing them. Hopefully you can see that. Nope. So as you can see, they are large. In fact, they're the largest of the Pacific salmon, hence their name. And I mentioned it already. Why are they congregating like this in our streams? For spawning, of course, for spawning. Okay, that's why they travel such a long way from the Pacific Ocean, is for that very important moment of life where they will spawn. And then, of course, they will die, which we'll talk more about in just a bit as well. So Nimbus Fish Hatchery, a legacy of Northern California. It has been around since the mid-50s, and it really is an institution of Sacramento. You might be wondering, what is it that we do here? Now, we raise 4.5 million Chinook salmon every year, as well as 500,000 steelhead trout, cousin to the salmon, for release back into the American River and the Delta. Okay, but why? Why do we do this? Well, the key is mitigation. Okay, mitigation. It's making up for a loss in habitat. So at one time, the American River provided about 100 miles of stream habitat for salmonids. However, when the Folsom Nimbus project was completed, most of that was lost. Okay, it was flooded and it was lost. And so the hatchery was built to replace the salmon and steelhead runs that were blocked by Nimbus Dam. So we make up for the loss in habitat by spawning and raising the fish ourselves and then re-releasing back into the wild. It is a multi-agency effort. So the dams were built by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, that's a federal agency, in partnership with the Fish and Wildlife Service of the United States, as well as our agency. Army Corps of Engineers has a hand in there as well. As you can imagine, it does cause some bureaucratic challenges when you have such a mix of government agencies working together. But we do more than that. We do more than that. Our hatchery also has a heart and a soul. Okay, we are an active hub that offers the whole community a chance to connect to the river next door. As Mallory said earlier, we have about 75,000 visitors every year, 10,000 of which are school-age children. And the bulk of that is just during salmon season, which takes place in the fall. So we just get a boom in visitation, and then it's practically dead in summertime. And in fact, generations of families have been visiting the hatchery. We all the time get elderly visitors who come and say, this is my grandchild, or even this is my great grandchild, and I'm taking them here because I visited as a child. Okay, we have that legacy here in the area. We are one of the only urban fish hatcheries. So there we have Jason Ferreira. He's one of our longtime scientific aides giving a guided tour to this group here. So we also give tours, guided tours to community-based organizations. And here's some lovely photos from our school tours. We have kids out on our river discovery trail and an indoor portion, as well as a clip from our virtual tours, because we did have to adapt during COVID. The visitor center was closed for 2.5 years, and we pivoted just like everybody else and developed a live virtual tour program to serve students. And we ended up successfully meeting with over 7,000 students, even annually during each COVID year that we were closed. So we still managed to be very successful with the school tours program. We just took it online, and that's actually a salmon dissection happening there on that virtual tour. And speaking of fish death, just one of the many controversies at our site, because we do kill all the salmon that come into our facility. And a lot of people have questions about that. It's probably the #1 question we get from visitors is, why are you killing the salmon? And of course, it is part of their natural life cycle. So once salmon spawn in the river, they will die. And when they enter into the hatchery, they will also die. It's expedited for safety reasons and for welfare reasons for the fish. And we have methods to do that sometimes surprise people. Like there's a mallet involved. They've recently tried to utilize a small captive bolt gun. So it looks similar to a livestock gun, but much smaller. And this is the method by which they do kill the salmon. And we'll see some more pictures of that coming up. So that's just one of our controversies, but let's rewind our historical memory here. We are all residents of California, I imagine, or familiar with some California history. And our state's history is familiar with controversy, let's say. So let me ask you another pop quiz question. What was the major historical catalyst that propelled colonization of California's rivers? What was the major historical catalyst? One event. Oh, Sandra wins this time. The gold rush. The gold rush. That's right. The gold rush was a major, major catalyst for the colonization of our rivers in California. Good. And I do see another question about the salmon death. And remember that. We'll come back to that. Yes, gold. Gold was the major catalyst, and we know that this industry had a positive impact on our economy and a lot of negative impacts on our river system. And that boom in our state's industrial growth really caused a major disruption to the native balance of our river ecosystems. We have some historic illustrations and photos here just to jog our memories. So here's some individual prospectors looking for gold washers, it says. All right, and once the easy to find gold was all depleted, of course, we scaled up. We introduced hydraulic mining, where we blasted away huge chunks of the bluffs. You can see these little men down here to give you some scale. And also dredging. Okay, dredging is when big volumes of gravel are torn up and moved around just to shake up any of the gold deposits that remain below the riverbed. And I learned actually in my research that the American River was the second largest dredge in our state, at more than 1 billion cubic yards of gravel moved. Okay, I don't actually know the biggest one, though. It didn't mention. So if you know what the biggest dredge was, let me know in the chat. Okay, and then mercury. Oops, I think I forgot to add another picture. But mercury is a heavy metal that prospectors, small and large, both use to basically withdraw gold from deposits. So the mercury would form an amalgam with the gold, and then it could be vaporized and only the gold was left. And this really is indicative of all of those opportunists who liked methods that were quick and dirty. But quick and dirty methods usually have residual effects. Okay, like these dredge tailings that you can see all along our river still. And the evidence of hydraulic mining we can still see right outside our hatchery. You can see that picture below. And of course, mercury. Mercury can remain in an ecosystem for 10,000 years. And this is a diagram that's not too easy to read, but it basically shows how the mercury has remained within the Sacramento Valley watershed and leaks its way out into the San Francisco Bay Delta estuary over time. It's one big cycle. And if anyone was impacted by the crazy storms we had recently, you can see how powerful water is and the ability it has to move our ecosystems all around. And the floods like we had here in Sacramento recently can dislodge sediment and sequestered mercury. I thought I'd show you a picture from our floods. This was just taken probably last week or a week and a half ago. And this is the basin below Nimbus Dam. And this is actually you can see the fish ladder on the left side of your screen. It's the fenced in area there. It's where the fish would enter into the ladder and then make their way up into the hatchery. But I'll show you a before picture. So before the floods, it looked like this. This lovely little basin habitat here, which was then flooded out because they needed to release water from the reservoirs from Folsom Lake and Lake Natoma. So Lake Natoma is a reservoir created by Nimbus Dam, which we see here. And these are the floodgates fully open with the recent floods. And here's a view of Nimbus Dam without the floodgates open. And the reason I'm showing you these dams is because to recognize a different side of the story, many would argue that colonization continued in another form. And that would be the dam construction here on the rivers. So as our cities grew, so did our needs for water. And I'd like you all to tell me, you have some familiarity with environmental systems. How do dams disrupt river systems? What are some ways that dams disrupt river systems? Let me know in the chat. And this is Folsom Dam, I didn't mention. So we have in our system Nimbus Dam, and then above that Folsom Dam. Okay, dams can cause the drying of tributaries. Nice, thanks, Sandra. Anything else? Dams can also, yes, they can prevent fish from getting back upstream for spawning, cause water temperature changes. Maybe one more? Can you think of one more? Ooh, dams cause submersion of wetland and riparian habitats. Yes, which are very, very key habitats for many living things. Yes, and they also can prevent the movement of natural material down a river, so gravel, sediment, which, as we will find out, has an impact on the salmon who need it. Great job, everyone. Okay, and others say that dams are vital to urban life. Okay, we have multiple benefits from dams: power generation, irrigation, of course, which is key in the Central Valley, municipal water supply, flood control, and then the hatchery itself runs on water from this river system, from the American River, which we'll find out is really important while raising the young salmon. Okay, so really the dams are a multi-use water resource, and we didn't mention, but I'm sure all of us enjoy, recreation. Okay, if you like stand-up paddleboarding on the lake, or jet skiing, or water skiing, or wakeboarding, we appreciate those reservoirs for their recreational opportunities. Okay, so downstream from Nimbus Dam is our hatchery, just at the base of the dam. And at Nimbus Fish Hatchery, salmon is king. Okay, we raise 4.5 million king salmon every year. And we talked about how the dams disrupt their natural journey upstream. So we must bring them into the hatchery. And this is how we do it. Okay, step one, we bring the fish in, we sedate them with an electroshock. Then they are killed with a blow to the head or the captive bolt gun. Females are actually, their arteries are cut and then they're washed. Okay, and then we remove the reproductive material. So this is a female with eggs. Okay, females hold about 5,000 eggs. And then from a male, of course, we extract the sperm to fertilize the eggs. Now, naturally speaking, this would all happen externally from within the river when salmon spawn naturally. And most of them do, actually. Most of our Chinook population spawns naturally in the river, but a portion of the salmon population is spawned in the hatchery. And some salmon die before spawning, even if they've made it upstream. And this is the result. We have some fertilized eggs here. You can see them growing. We call these eyed eggs because they have little eyes. And then we will eventually release them once they're old enough. And of course, I had mentioned the fish ladder, which is the mechanism by which salmon make their way from the river up to the hatchery. So it ascends, they go up. This is actually the old ladder. It's now been replaced by a new one, but it's the same simple design. It's essentially a large flume of water with ascending steps. And as we think of the salmon's journey, we can remember that salmon really link the Pacific Ocean to our Central Valley waterways. okay, where they enter both life and death. Okay, without the salmon, we would not get key nutrients brought upstream into our riparian habitats here. So they are a keystone species, not only for the nutrients they bring, but for all of the meat they provide each fall for the wildlife that make the riparian habitat their home. I can tell you though, if you're around the river towards the end of salmon season, it's pretty stinky, okay? Because there's a lot of rotting carcasses. And the carcass crews out there chopping them up, counting them. It's a really dirty job. Okay, another pop quiz. We've learned all about their ocean to stream journey. What is the term for fish who live adult life in the ocean and return to streams to spawn? What's that term? I gave you a hint. It's 4 syllables. It's a big word. Good, Steve. Steve's the winner. Anadromous. Anadromous fish live their adult life in the ocean and return to the stream to spawn, where it's very safe for youngsters to grow before they return to the ocean for adulthood. Good, anadromous. And here's our just a brief overview of the anadromous salmon life cycle. And in the next graphic, we'll see where each stage takes place and in which season. So we have fall, winter, spring, and summer. And the location there is on the bottom. So as you can see, they leave the ocean once their adulthood is wrapping up, moving up river. Then they spawn and die in their natal stream, which is where the new generation is born and will grow. So that gravel is very important. So if you hold up your fists like you're getting ready for a boxing match, that size is about what size gravel the salmon need for their youngsters to grow. And then they'll start moving downstream. Okay, it takes them about 4 to 6 months to move all the way down to the delta, where they will smoltify. So we know estuaries are a very important transition zone, and it's the same for salmon. And at this point in life, they're like teenagers leaving for college. Okay, they form schools, and when they're ready, they leave out for life in the ocean, where our linkage comes in. So they will actually travel up and down the Central California coastline, feeding and growing stronger, usually between 2 to 4 years. So I just thought I'd show you a map for those who like maps. The red arrows indicate the direction that salmon go from the American River down the Sacramento River and then out through the Bay Delta area. And I have a better picture on the next slide. I like this because you can see the colors. You can see the water systems mixing here. The white arrows show juvenile salmon, and then the yellow arrows show adult salmon, spawning stage salmon coming back. And they do swim up and down the coastline, feeding on smaller fish because they'll need their fat reserves for that journey upstream. They will stop feeding. And the San Francisco Bay, Golden Gate, okay, it marks both the start line and the final passage of the Chinook salmon's life. So really it is just one big circle from beginning to end. Between 1 and 5% of young salmon, only 1 and 5% will survive to return to their stream of origin and spawn. And we're going to come full circle here. I'm going to show you a video we took yesterday of the release of juvenile. These are steelhead because we've already released the salmon, but it's all the same process. So the steelhead trout have been released back into the river. I'll just play this clip here. So you can see we truck them down to the river. This is not something we advertise. because we don't want poachers to come and scoop up these young fish, but we just shoot them out. And then they are on their own, but they do have that head start. So generally a higher percentage of hatchery raised fish will survive to a spawning stage. And here's a graphic, oops, to help you see how each life stage reduces in number. 2,500 indicates the number of steelhead eggs per female, but salmon have a similar pattern. Okay, and of course, salmon feed many other animals along their life stages. One of which is people. We love salmon. Sushi, yum. So you might be wondering, well, how do we have an impact on salmon? Okay, there's many ways. Primarily, it's our everyday choices, being a consumer, buying seafood. It can be very hard to find information about where our seafood is sourced from. And I fully recognize that. I struggle with that myself. We can support spawning and rearing habitat restoration, like this picture we see on the left. This was done by the Water Forum here in Sacramento. They do touch-ups every year, touch-ups, quote unquote, because remember we said that material doesn't naturally move downstream anymore with the dams in place. Storm drain protection. This drain flows to creek. We know that phrase. Conservation of resources such as water. Reporting poaching. Okay, that's CalTIP. That's a number you're going to want if you see any kind of poaching in our state. Angling responsibly and avoiding spawning and rearing areas when you're angling, because they do take time to develop there in the riverbed. Okay, so for my final pop quiz question for you all, and then I'll take your questions. Can you recall the species of salmon raised by Nimbus Fish Hatchery? So we already said king salmon, but what's the other name for it? What's the other name for it? And then can you tell me one thing that makes them unique as a species? Good job, Karen. Chinook salmon, that's right, Chinook salmon. So Chinook and king salmon, both the same. They are the largest of the Pacific salmon species, of which there are 5. And can anyone tell me something that makes them unique? I guess I just said one. They are the largest of the Pacific salmon species. They are odd looking. Yes, they are. We didn't talk much about the transformation they make, but they do develop that hooked nose as they move upstream. They start to deteriorate and turn into zombie looking fish. Okay, we also talked about the fact that they're anadromous. That's unique. It's not often that fish are anadromous. It's a unique adaptation. They also, we mentioned that our river system is the lowest latitude that Pacific salmon do spawn. So they usually are prone to spawning in more northern areas, up on the northern coastline, up through the northwest coastline, the Pacific Northwest, up through Canada and Alaska. Great. So we overall learn today that the Nimbus Fish Hatchery is really a legacy and institution of Sacramento, although may reflect some continuing controversy that remains today. And we see, though, that it has an important role to play in the life history of native salmon and trout, like the steelhead trout, that call our waterways home. Now, I would like to say thank you and take your questions. And please feel free to contact me with more information. If there's a question I won't be able to answer, send me it in an email form and I will find you the answer. And then I'll also put my work mobile there if you want it. Let's see. I'm going to open up the Q&A. I think I saw some questions in the chat too, so I'm going to, okay. Are any of the released salmon is tracked with GPS transmitters or other kinds of tagging? Yes, Steve. About a quarter of the salmon we raise receive a tiny, tiny coated wire tag in their nose, about 1 millimeter long. And then when they return, we can tell which fish have been tagged because they will also have their adipose fin clipped and they're removed from the spawned out fish, and then the scientists process them. That they collect a lot of data from the tag, the hatchery, the year, and there's sensors along the river so that it can read those tags. I wish I could tell you more about the scientific research, but like I always say, I'm just a pretend scientist. I do the education part and I'm always asking the scientists, like, what the heck are you doing? So they're doing all sorts of crazy stuff. They take scale samples. They take otoliths, which are the ear stones of fish, and can give them lots of chemical, biochemical information. Okay, are there studies on how many hatchery fish actually make it to the ocean? Ooh, well, there's likely monitoring that's done on smolts in the Delta, and there's all sorts of populations that, like Chinook Fall Run populations that are monitored in our state. But I don't know specifically about the numbers, like if they're actually checking numbers on that. Of course they do, they do a lot of statistics, so they do approximations. They do have ways of approximating fish that return using those coded wire tags. Okay, but they're not GPS transmitters, the tags. I'm scrolling back up because I think there were a few questions that came in earlier. Oh yes, I remember about the dead salmon. That's our #1 question. So it's natural to wonder, well, what do you do with all those salmon carcasses? The ones that spawn naturally in the river, of course, deteriorate nature's way. They become incorporated into the environment, they decompose, or they're consumed by scavengers. We see a lot of scavengers. We have river otters, we have birds of prey, bobcats. There's a sea lion. He makes the news every year. He makes his way up for steelhead season and basically gobbles up live steelhead. But the dead salmon that leave the hatchery are put on ice and they're trucked up to Washington, salmon capital USA, where they are processed into useful products. So we have pet foods, especially fertilizers. There's some meat that can be salvaged for human consumption. And that's canned and donated to food banks in the Central Valley. We also had a surgeon come in and tell us that salmon can be made into dissolving sutures. So if you've ever had surgery, you might be part salmon. Okay, are public tours available, Sandra? Yeah, public tours are available like as a guided tour when there's some kind of community-based organization. So scout groups or Rotary clubs or women's groups, only because there's a minimum number that we need. We actually have very limited staffing, and it's been a little bit of one of those bureaucratic challenges that I mentioned. And our priority is always K-12 groups, and so we have to find time on weekends usually for those community-based organizations. But we have a visitor center, and it's open 8 to 3 or 9 to 3 on weekends. So that's sort of self-guided. Any other questions? What am I missing? Let's see. Chat. Okay, here we go. Great. Oh, thanks, Steve. That's a cool story. Are king salmon transplanted to lakes and streams away from the American River? If not, was that done in the past? Oh gosh, that's a good question. There's been such a wide-ranging history of transplanting fish. It's more common that they transplant kokanee salmon. Kokanee salmon are a form of landlocked salmon, like you would find them in Lake Tahoe. They don't actually um, make their way to the ocean. So all Pacific salmon that we have are connected to the ocean in some way, not in the landlocked areas. Perhaps it happened in the past. Um, I really am not sure. I'd have to find out more about that. But currently, we have more responsible transplanting practices, and our department deals with native species. Now, steelhead trout are, who knows the name for a steelhead trout that never makes it to the ocean? Anyone? It's a very common trout because these fish will be transplanted. Yeah, rainbow trout. That's right. That's right. So rainbow trout are just the landlocked version of steelhead, or you could say steelhead are the ocean-going version of rainbow trout. So they do have different life histories, but they're essentially the same fish. Yeah, and thank you all for your attention today and your engagement in the chat. And I do hope you come and visit us at Nimbus Fish Hatchery the next time you're in the Sacramento area. Like I said, we're an institution and people love to come and see us. We only have steelhead trout coming upstream through February. So now's a good time. Otherwise, we don't have any fish to see after that until the fall.
Thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen one last time. All right, so don't forget, you can find a list of other programs like this at centralcoastparks.org/mind-walks. And some of those include our new in-person programs as well. And then don't forget to take a minute and complete that little survey that will pop up when you close out of this Zoom window. And we thank you so much for being here and taking the time to just learn more with Stephanie. And she was so kind as to give her contact information. So if you have any lingering questions, reach out. Thanks, Stephanie. And I'm gonna have to get myself up there for a visit too.
Sounds good. And thanks, everyone. I appreciate it.
Bye, you guys. See you next time.
Bye.